Hi, welcome to the May session of the Scarlet Quill Society. Dead silence, during which you can like, subscribe, hit the bell, do the YouTube things. And then when my brain reboots, I can say, we're doing a little bit of a me ramble and a little bit of a co-ramble this month. So apologies if the screen jumps a little bit. I think we're recording in speaker view instead of trying to pin everyone, because I'm going to be doing probably the majority of the talking because that's my thing. I talk a lot. I'm Rowan. I talk. That's my job. My co-host is also my co-writer and my co-editor, Christine, and she has graciously agreed to let me show her off. We're going to be talking a little bit about our book in the middle of this session, which I'm actually planning to open with a big, long rant about Agatha Christie. So on the topic of colonialism, Yeah Right does open these sessions with a land acknowledgement, and both Christine and I are on the traditional and current lands of many indigenous peoples, the Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Cathlamet, Clackamas, the bands of Chinook, Tualatin, Calaplia, and Molalla. And I think I left out the tribes of the Grand Ronde, I'm sorry. But as part of our duty of stewardship to that land, Yeah Right donates to the Naya Family Center as part of our land acknowledgements. Naya provides culturally specific programs and services that guide people in the direction of personal success and balance through cultural empowerment. So, yeah, acknowledgement without action is just, it's some words. And if your organization is doing a land acknowledgement, or you typically do a land acknowledgement, maybe take a minute and good, I didn't mute my speaker. Still working on getting used to the new speaker, you guys. Speaker? Am I 100 years old? It's a microphone. Anyway, so colonialism and tropes. And when I say colonialism and tropes, there are three that are going to spring to your mind: Rudyard Kipling, Ernest Hemingway, and Agatha fucking Christie. And let's hope that F-bomb is far enough into this session that YouTube doesn't immediately demonetize us, not that we're getting money. So what does Agatha Christie have to do with tropes besides literally everything? Agatha Christie is going to be my counter example this month. And I'm sorry right now if you love Agatha Christie, if you adore her. I like a cozy mystery. I do. I love a cozy mystery. Allow me to introduce you to Ngaio Marsh. Ngaio, marsh, like the wetlands, who is not as popular as Agatha Christie, despite writing in the same period and in the same timeline, in the same genre, for some reason, which might have to do with her name being Ngaio. Let me introduce you to Dorothy Sayers, who is the absolute queen of the mysteries, and of really healthy relationships. Peter Wimsey and Lady Harriet are goals, and fight me. Sorry about the shuffling. The dog is right here. She's gonna cry. I'm gonna feed her. That's how we're gonna be. Christine is very used to this. Like every time we talk, she probably, do you look forward to these meetings? There's like 200% less me yelling at the dog to shut up.
I look forward
like,
to
I have to be
the
professional. I can't just
cameos in the background.
I think the cats are mostly asleep. Gremlin came through while we were setting up, but so Agatha Christie, the problem with Agatha Christie, and I'm gonna jump right in and start with the Murder on the Orient Express and Death on the Nile, which are in everybody's minds right now because the movies. Agatha Christie doesn't understand how to write a mystery. What she does understand is a trope. And a lot of people think that Agatha Christie writes really good mysteries because they think that the hallmark of a really good mystery is that you can't figure it out. And that's not quite true. The hallmark of a really good mystery is that you could have figured it out. And that's what Agatha Christie will never give you. All of a sudden, she's like, hey, this guy knew that guy 20 years ago in India when they were both attached to the same troop. And you're like, I didn't even know that they had an army background. Like, that's not information you gave us. So an Agatha Christie mystery is this adorable stack of cozy tropes that goes nowhere. And then she's like, tee hee, you didn't figure it out. And that's not good writing. There's some sort of meowing happening behind me. All right. Well, either we're gonna get a cat cameo or we're not. So she doesn't use these tropes the way that we want to use these tropes, or any tropes really. She doesn't use them to solve problems. She uses them to create problems, honestly. But because they are tropes, they do the thing that tropes do, which is feel familiar. Excuse me. So yeah, I like a cozy mystery. I love a cozy video game. I was over at my sister's house playing cozy video games with my nibbling, and my sister turned to me and goes, you like games with dead people in them? And I'm like, yeah, I sure do. So Cozy Grove, Spiritfarer, what's the really, really cute death one with the crow? It's so hard. It's the hardest little platformer. And it starts out really easy and then it just becomes like impossibly hard. It's really good though. If anybody plays the video game with the crow, and you're the Grim Reaper, it's really cute. It's really cute. But I do like a good cozy game about dead people. There's no pressure. You're not going to get anybody killed. They're already dead. They just kind of need some things from you. And the things that they need from you are very tropey. They are finite, concrete tasks that they articulate well. And that's not something that we get in real life. And so that's really soothing for me. Like, I need you to take me to this place. And yeah, I've got to figure out how to get to the place. But I can do that. I can do the rules of the game, say I can do that. And it's the same thing that you want to do in your writing, right? The rules of the game say that you can get person A to point B. And so like in our book, there's a lot of getting person A to point B, isn't there?
An awful lot.
An awful lot. I say our book, the one that we finished. It is in fact all about getting person A to point B, first to the place where they pick up the MacGuffin and then to the place where they drop the MacGuffin off. I'm trying to do this without giving away too much of the plot, but I know, like, this is what I'm talking about this month is literally our writing process, right? It's you come up with really interesting characters and beautiful places for them to be. And then I plug in tropes until the characters get to the places.
It does work an awful lot. As an aside, it's a really fun process. So
that's what she said. You're not doing any of the heavy lifting. So yeah, so we have these characters and they need to go to a place, right? And we're gonna solve that. And the things that you use to solve that can be tropey as heck. And the tropier they are, the cozier your video game gets, or the cozier your writing gets, even though you are writing a murder mystery. Someone has been, insert redacted here. Make it as big or as gross as you want. The more tropes you plug in after that, the cozier it gets. Law and Order SVU is not a cozy mystery. There's, you know, you're gonna have your sexy pipetting scene in the, that's CSI. See, they're all the same. They're literally all the same. You get Law and Order, you get Law and Order SVU, you get CSI. They use the same tropes. They're going to, and you know what the tropes are, you know what's coming, but it still works. And every episode they present a problem, right? There is going to be, you know, depending on the nature of the thing. If it's CSI, it's going to be some sort of unsolvable crime or murder. You're going to start with very, very few people. You're going to start with a lot of objects and a lot of facts, and you're going to link those objects to people. And then you're going to link the people to what happened. And you've got your order part if you were Law and Order. Now in SVU, you start with people. You have a person with a story that you have to get from them, and then you have to get enough objects and facts and evidence to back that story up and present it. And so they're the same story, they're just going the other direction. Same thing with something like Bones, right? Which I think is finally off the air. That went on long after it needed to stop. I loved Bones though. I loved the first couple of seasons. And again, cozy mystery. I love it. So you're gonna start with, you know, a slurry that used to be a body, and then they have to figure out. And so at some point, each of these episodes is sparked by the writer's room finding a fun fact and wanting to use that fun fact. And so there's a fun fact like, oh, bone has this specific density, but I don't remember what the body was buried in after it was chipped. Oh, rubber pellets have this other specific density. So if you swirl a liquid with a suspension of bone chips and rubber pellets, they will separate out. So you can use these fun facts to get information to people, right? So, and this is again why Agatha Christie sucks so much. She doesn't use her tropes to get information to people. She uses her tropes to keep information away from you. She puts the trope in the way of you learning things. So she will have as a trope character the blustery old army colonel, and that's fine. You have expectations from that character. It feels very cozy. You're familiar with that character. But then instead of doing the thing that maybe a writer would do now, you would have to do now, I think, because we're not using the blustery old stock colonel character. People get tired of it, so now they're exploring the edges of the blustery stock colonel character. Whether you have, you know, well, like let's look at like Colonel Potter in MASH is the blustery stock colonel character, but even in MASH we were starting to explore the thing that made him important was that he, well, I mean, I guess it's part of the blustery stock colonel character. He cares deeply about kids and horses. So now you're going to have your blustery stock colonel character, but maybe he's going to be gay, or maybe he's going to be, there's going to be something else going on with him that is not in the wholesome blustery stock colonel character. Agatha Christie puts this blustery stock colonel character there. He doesn't have anything in him besides the wholesome blustery stock colonel character. He never talks in a way that would let you think that there was anything else. And then they're like, and then his bastard child from when he was 12. And you're like, That's my shocked British face. It actually works pretty well, frankly. Sorry to any shocked Brits out there right now. Or send me a picture of your shocked British face. I'm down. So that creates a problem, right? Like that's a withholding of information. Which can be fine, but isn't necessarily a hallmark of a good mystery. You know, like, okay, you know, I'm willing to play with this blustery stock colonel character. I'm willing to say, oh, okay, yeah, you know, he could have had some connections. That's an interesting. It's not even a send up of the character. He's almost expected to have had a mistress, but when you don't give us any information and then we're supposed to somehow have known that not only exists, but that child was set to inherit his entire fortune, but only if he died before midnight in, you know, this year, and because there's going to be a change in the law. That's actually that's a plot from a different, better mystery writer. So when you find out what book that is, let me know, because it's a good book. And they don't hide the ball at all about the law. So where did I put the dog treats? They're there. So solving problems. We talked a little bit when we were preparing for this meeting. We talked about Cinderella, right? And Little Red Riding Hood, and about how they solve problems, similar problems, essentially. In their purest, oldest forms, they're both morality tales. If you are good, you will be rewarded. If you are bad, you will get ate by a wolf. Or really punished, right? And so it could have, Little Red Riding Hood can be told any number of ways as long as you hit those high points. But the tropes are almost interchangeable. You have the person that you want to deliver the moral lesson to, which is almost certainly going to be a child, but it could also be like an evil corporate boss. That's another big trope. We've got, I mean, Dickens, right? Dickens's whole thing was, you know, we've got A Christmas Carol. So we've got the same person that we want to deliver a moral lesson to. So we pick this person who clearly does not have any inherent morality, which, yes, is usually a child. Children are, I mean, you have children.
They have their own perception of right and wrong.
Well, they don't come with morals,
exactly.
right? Like there's nothing loaded there.
Exactly.
And you do your best to share your sense of right and wrong and what's important in the world, but that's not software they come preloaded with.
Might be easier, might also be harder, to be honest. Depending on who loaded up the software.
Right. Well, I mean, you know, we don't have time for a debate on is there an objective morality. Right. So
whole
different. But even, you know, absent that, because I mean, I know what my moral code is. I'm pretty sure what your moral code is, and to the extent that we can know another human being's moral code. So these stories are designed to program them, right? You have 3 bones. Don't even. So you're going to start with child. You are going to have thing child disobeys you about, and then you're going to have lesson learned. And how horrible the lesson learned is depends on who's telling the story and how they're trying to instill the moral. Because Little Red Riding Hood isn't not Where the Wild Things Are.
Mhm.
In both cases, you have a child who disobeys their parents for an immediate reward and later a punishment. I don't know if it's picking up on the mic, but the dog is making the saddest little lip smacking sound because she's not getting the treat that she wants. She has bones. It's so sad. It's so sad to be you. It's so sad to only have bones. Um, so in Little Red Riding Hood, of course, you've got whatever her name is, Red Hood, which is Jason Todd. Shout out to my DC fans. So Jason Todd is walking through the forest and someone shows up, and you're not supposed to talk to strangers. And in Where the Wild Things Are, Max is bopping around and his parents tell him not to be so rowdy and break stuff, and Max grabs some pots and pans and breaks stuff. Both cases, we have children who are directly disobeying something that the adults in their life have told them to do. Max gets sent to bed with no supper and then becomes the king of the wild things. Lesson learned. Well, lesson learned in that Max, after becoming the king of the wild things, of course, realizes that actually being the boss all the time is a little bit tough, and also it's not fun. Rule breaking is the thing that's fun about breaking the rules, not the thing that you're actually doing. And so maybe if the thing that you're actually doing isn't all that fun, maybe just follow the rules. Meanwhile, Little Red talks to a stranger, tells the stranger personal information about herself and her family. Don't do that. Strangers on the internet are bad. It's the same story, right? It's the same story as CSI.
Mm-hmm.
Little Red tells a stranger on the internet some personal information about herself and her granny, and the next thing you know, CSI is investigating, 2 potential bodies in a tenement, and you don't know if it's Grandma and the Woodcutter or Little Red. So something bad happens, right? Do the bad thing happens. But you can fill it with any number of tropes, like things that kids don't like to do. They don't obey you when you say go to sleep. For the record, I don't obey me when I say go to sleep either. Like, this isn't a lesson that we learn as adults. I definitely appreciate that you need to be in your room and at least trying to sleep, because kids and self-regulation also not so great, but sometimes you got to learn the lesson the hard way. So you can use all kinds of tropes to solve those problems. And really, the problem that they're solving in Little Red Riding Hood is, how do we get from the disobedience to the punishment, or from the child to the punishment? And the problem we're solving in Cinderella is, okay, well, Cinderella she's fine, she's doing great for some values of great. She's pious, she respects her mother's tree, she does what she's told even though she's treated poorly, she respects her parents even though her stepmother treats her poorly, she's kind to strangers, she feeds birds, she doesn't complain. The not complaining thing was huge in Cinderella at the time. It was very huge. And so how do we get her from there to a reward? And how do we come up with a reward that is commensurate with how good she has had to be for how long? And so enter Prince, right? And then you have to solve the problem of why though? Why would Prince? So we're gonna throw this arranged marriage ball, and we're gonna have a double standard because the prince is definitely like not obeying his parents by directly courting any of the eligible people there that are there to make reasonable alliances. Like he's getting given sort of a library of potential partners, and he's completely disobeying his parents, but oh well, no consequences for the prince, I guess. Instead, what he's going to get is a perfect obedient wife because she doesn't have a personality. Did you drop it? Did you drop your jerky? The biggest sad. But the other way you could use tropes is to solve for, just like the tiny problems, right? Like they don't even have to be big plot problems like that. It can be little problems. Like in our book, we needed two things. First of all, we needed to give the reader enough information and the character enough information to figure out what was going on, because the climax of the book was not going to be as climactic if people weren't super, super tense, knowing, oh, we are effectively going to this place to do a terrible thing, as opposed to we are going to this place to do a good thing, as opposed to we are going to this place to do a neutral thing. So we needed a sense of anticipation. So we needed to put enough information into both the character, because it's a tight first person viewpoint. So we needed to get that character enough information to get the reader enough information. And one of the ways that we wanted to get that character information is we had to solve another problem. Your favorite problem. Hot pirate captain problem.
Definitely my favorite problem.
So to solve our hot pirate captain problem, everybody go watch Our Flag Means Death real quick. Come back. To solve our hot pirate captain problem, we needed hot pirate captain and point of view character to be in the same place at the same time a lot. So one of the ways that we did this was we funneled information to hot pirate captain to funnel to character, so that they had to be in the same place at the same time, so that character could do things with information. And it gave them a reason to, you see how she has eaten so many treats. You're spoiled. So yeah, so we used it to solve two problems, right? One is to give these two characters enough time together, because otherwise, like one of the tropes that we were struggling with, that we were trying not to put in, and it kept creeping back, right? Because that's what tropes do, is I felt an instant connection with this person, and therefore we are meant to be together forever and ever and ever. I'm 19. I have never left home before, and I don't like doing what my family tells me. And so the first responsible adult I see, I will latch onto, and then and they, despite being, is this Bangs? Who knows? They, despite being a good bit older than me and having a job and a productive role in society, obviously they will fall for me too. And so we kept having to be like, no, this age gap is too, how do we, and to some extent, because we were writing science fiction, we were able to solve that problem with, oh, but people have a 200-year lifespan, NBD. Age gaps get less important. And then you run into the same problems, right? Like, yeah, but I don't have a problem with like a 40 and a 50-year-old dating, because they've got like plenty of stuff in common. They both have enough life experience, but a 10 and a 20-year-old should not be dating. ever. Even though it's the same age gap. So so we had to solve that problem, and we had to solve for trope, right? I like how you're looking at me like this is the first time you've heard me explain to you that I used trope to solve for trope.
No, it's more that it's just, well, it's fun to talk about your work and hear about, just to kind of dive into this stuff. Because when we were writing it, I at least was not thinking about tropes. I wasn't
No,
thinking
you were just generating them. And
I was yeah,
trying to
probably
read them
just generating them, throwing them out there. And in retrospect, I have some favorite tropes that
Boy, do you.
and I think that between us, with your kind of careful work, you were able to kind of shove aside the ones that didn't work, or that were too much, or that were like too cliche or whatever, and we kind of focused in on a couple of them instead of overloading the whole story, so that it was trope upon trope. So and I think that was kind of the key, is to have
and to be aware of the tropes.
Mm-hmm.
To be aware of the tropes that you're using to solve problems. Don't just solve the problem and think that you invented it. Because especially if you use a trope, you are evoking a whole entire, and this is how we end up having effectively like a couple of sensitivity checks on the story, because one of the tropes that you used early on that I didn't spot, that came up in a discussion, because I was talking to one of my usual sensitivity readers, and we were drinking some tea, and she said, "Oh, you can't name that."
Yeah.
You cannot name that. You absolutely cannot.
Yeah. Did not occur to either one of us at the onset.
Well, at the time that it had originally been named, it's I want to be clear that it still wasn't okay. But it wasn't as not okay as it became during the course of our writing, when there was a huge controversy. And this is why, writers, you need to stay abreast of what is happening in the industry. You have to, because otherwise you end up evoking the spicy Oriental Zeppelin, and you don't want to do that. And you don't even know what's going on. You don't know that there is, that the careers are being made and broken and people are getting canceled, and like, just be aware of what's going on. If you are, God, I still don't even want to say the name out loud, because if it gets put into the the subtitles and then script, then we get targeted again. But a certain scandal about ethics in games journalism, if you evoke that, if you are using tropes that have been advocated for by people whose morals you do not agree with, you are going to be aligning yourself politically as a writer with those people.
Whether or not you intended.
If you are writing magical school fiction right now, you have to be so careful to be clear that you are not in Joe Rowling's camp. 100%, unless you are a TERF, in which case you can just like unsubscribe. It's fine. No, but yes. But you have to be so clear, and that means you have to know what's going on in the industry. You have to know. If you don't know what Mercedes Lackey has been up to in the past year, you should go look that up. You should be aware. There are some very, very good industry blogs out there that will keep you up to date on what's going on. Jim Hines writes a very good one. He's very readable. He's very clear. Excuse me. He is, I would say, partisan but fair in his politics. Like, he's not going to mischaracterize something for the sake of sounding right. Yeah, no, that's all I have to say about that. And anyway, his blog, you know, he will link out a lot. He always has the receipts. Go chase all those God, I love footnotes. That's my trope. That's my absolute kryptonite trope. Are you Terry Pratchett? Do you want to give me footnotes? Give me footnotes, Terry Pratchett. Drown me in footnotes, Sir Terry. I'm so ashamed that we didn't find a way to get footnotes in our book.
Not too late. We could totally
not too late. Put half the book in footnotes so you can get back that other 150,000 words we cut. But so, you know, any problem that you're having in your writing, I talk a lot when I'm talking about plot and not tropes, which we're evolving into, I think, this month. But when I talk about plot, I say it's easier to move the world than your character. And tropes are one way to do that. And what I mean when I say it's easier to move the world than your character, certainly Christine, the character that you started with for the novel, she had some things that she would do and some things that she would not do. There were things we could not make her do and stay in character. Just could not. She wouldn't do it. And so you can write, this character does this. People, and I want to be clear, people who do sell books, certainly a whole bunch of Twilight is based on people acting just wildly out of character. Like you spend all this time setting up this character who is, you know, either incredibly desirable or incredibly goofy or incredibly awkward, and then you have them do things that a character that you've described could not do or would not do. I want you to be better than that, writers. I want you to be better than that. So one of the ways to move the world around the character is to use these tropes. So I know in the post I was talking about, like, how do you get these two characters to meet when character A has no reason to go to character B? We have, you know, a plumber and a doctor, and they're just moving in parallel through the world. You can think of a lot of reasons for a plumber and a doctor to meet, right? I hope you can. There's so many situations in which either a doctor needs a plumber or a plumber needs a doctor. So many situations. And yeah, many of them are tropey, like, oh, hey, my toilet exploded. Or, you know, or I have to wash up for surgery and now my sink doesn't work. You can put these two people in the same place by moving the world instead of trying to change your characters. And tropes will help you do that. Tropes are the levers with which you move the world. You have Little Red Riding Hood. You have her grandmother's house. How is Jason going to get to grandma's house? Why is it going to take so long that a wolf shows up? Oh, let's put some woods in the way. Are scary woods a giant trope? Yes. Do we care? No, we do not care at all. And in fact, the novel that we're working on right now, we explore the scary woods, right? I'm trying not to give too much away because Christine doesn't actually know that much about the scary woods yet. Yeah, scary woods. You know, is it the same scary woods? So let's ignore our book and go to the place I stole the trope from, which is Stephen Sondheim's Into the Woods. What if all the woods were the same woods? What if the woods that Little Red Riding Hood goes into, and Sleeping Beauty and Cinderella and Snow White and Rapunzel and the prince, what if they're all the same woods? And then we're going to suddenly bring all these characters together in the woods, because how else will all these fairy tale characters meet? What's the one trope that's the same in all their stories? There's the woods. Boom, you have your meeting. We can bring them all together in the woods.
Now that's going to be stuck in everybody's heads for the next week.
Yeah, guys, go watch the original recording, the original cast recording. The new Disney one is not good. They've taken out big chunks of the songs. They've taken out important songs. If that's what got you into it, great, but go watch the one with Bernadette Peters. She's a brilliant witch. It's a stage recording. The fast changes are incredible. The set changes are incredible. The wolf's costume is incredible.
I love that recording.
It's so good. It's such a good recording, and the fact that they did have a film of it is, you've seen that one though, right? Or have you just heard the recording?
Oh no, I've seen the stage.
Okay.
Seen the stage
Yeah.
recording. I have not seen the new Disney one, because I was like, I'm not. No, I don't want to.
I tried.
Like the one I know.
I was saying, this is the other thing about tropes, is that it's comforting enough. This is something that's beautiful about really, really tropey work, right? Is that it's comforting enough that you can just like kind of look away from it and come back to it, and you're like, oh, I know how we got from here to here, because I recognized the start of this trope and the end of this trope, and so I understand that in the middle somebody was frozen in ice for a generation. Sorry, Captain America. So I was sewing and I needed something I didn't have to look at, but they had changed so many of the important things about it that I rage quit and went off to watch something else. Back to my Studio Ghibli tropes. My kids and wars and giant insects. Anyway, is that all I have to say about? Did I miss anything?
I don't think so. I think you covered most of it. You know, I think kind of what it boils down to for me is, and this is kind of a theme for the whole series, I think, is that tropes are not necessarily cliches. Like you can use them to your benefit. They are, but
the cliches are cliches because they work, right? Like something gets, it's no teamwork makes the dream work, is what I'm saying. Like there's meaning behind it. Yeah. Christine's cackling because I say teamwork makes the dream work all the time, because it's like that, and like it is what it is. It's one of my favorite, like, horrible, meaningless sayings. Like, whose dream? Whose dream? Is my dream to work for you? That's not my dream. Teamwork makes your dream work, and you're not even on my team, boss.
You know, but the point being that these things can be used in ways that aren't tired. Like they can be functional pieces of a story that you shouldn't necessarily avoid just because they are tropes.
Yeah, I know. When I teach plot, a lot of people think that they have to come up with, and over the years and years that we ran the grids, we saw it again and again, and even in the super challenge, right? People think that they have to come up with something that is so far from the prompt and so unexpected, and that every single character has to be unique, and every single idea has to be unique, and every single, word and phrase has to sound like just them and only them, and has to be like a shining jewel. And so it takes them forever to write this thing, and then they hand it in, and I'm like, no, this is just a different trope that you didn't know that you had to invent from scratch. And the one you originally thought of was fine. It would have served you really well, because then you would have already had your answer and could have focused on writing the story well. It doesn't matter that the kind of thing you're writing has been written before. See also cozy mysteries. What matters is that you're the one doing the telling, and how you treat it, and how aware you are of your tropes, and of, if you haven't watched last month's recording, guys, go watch it. It's absolutely brilliant. TC has already said he wants to come back, so I'm excited about that. We're hoping to put something together later in the year again, but we talked about tropes that are currently irredeemable, and why they're irredeemable, the harms that they do in the world, and the real world effects of those tropes. And you need to be aware of what those tropes are, so that you can counteract that, so that you can use the tropes that put good into the world. You can use, so I talked a lot about Red Riding Hood and Cinderella. Those are the opposite of what we want. Cinderella doesn't teach you how to be a good person. It teaches you how to be an abuse victim.
Mhm.
Red Riding Hood doesn't teach you anything about mindful evaluation of a situation. It doesn't teach you how to tell if someone is safe, because sometimes you have no choice other than to talk to a stranger. Sometimes that's your option. And if that's your option, Red Riding Hood does not teach you the important things that you need to know. So the other thing that we talked about, last month was stuff like inspiration porn, which is a catch-all term for the trope of, here is a person who has faced something terrible, loss of their parents, extreme poverty, homelessness, loss of a limb, but they're doing better than you, the viewer, now. And a lot of times these stories are set up in a way that pits this successful person with their, I think I'm going to have to use handicap as a catch-all phrase, their impediment. The successful person with their impediment against all other people with the same impediment, suggesting that all of those people are not successful because they didn't have the virtue that this person had. And so it's like, man walks 10 miles to work every day, boss gives him a new car. That's not, and it is set up to inspire people. Well, if you walk 10 miles to work every day without complaining, maybe there's a reward for you at the end of it, instead of saying, well, if the boss can afford to just give cars away. So like setting that up, you don't want to use those tropes, right? You don't want to use the tropes of, well, my wheelchair user is more virtuous than many wheelchair users, and therefore like all of these good things are happening to her. And what it puts you in the point of is those weird, like, oh, what was her name, like Little Effie or something, like the Victorian morality tales where the little kid like dies slowly and horribly, but she's so kind and good to those around them that everyone converts to Christianity. Yeah. But that is, it's, people are dying slowly and horribly from no insulin, but the really, really good ones might survive and get a gift, so everybody convert to capitalism. It's the exact same morality tale, right? I need y'all to remember little Effie dies. She dies. So you can't do that. You cannot consciously avoid those tropes. You can't consciously just have people in your stories who experience marginalizations that you don't, unless you are aware of the tropes that you're using and know how to play with them. I think Kat said last month, let your characters be mediocre. If the trope that you constantly use is character is good, good things happen, okay, but you're not doing the world any favors and you're not doing your writing any favors. Sometimes person is mediocre and some good and some bad stuff happens to them, and that's actually, that's a story that's worth telling. It's still an interesting story. I'm gonna say this and it's gonna sound real stupid. Sorry, I'm trying not to use stupid. My nibbling would boink me for that one. That's not a nice word. It's why I like Batman more than Superman. But I think overall it's why I liked DC more than Marvel when I was a kid, because other than the supers, DC doesn't really have a lot of superpowered characters. They have a lot of characters that are doing the best they can with what they have. So, like, yes, Bruce Wayne is a billionaire. I'm just going to set that aside, because those billions are not actually doing him, like, you can't buy your way to being the world's greatest detective. And I'm talking about Golden Age comics, where he is actually solving crimes, not just beating up people in alleys. Modern violent Batman is not my favorite Batman. But like, he's adopting orphans and doing, Batman was CSI before CSI was CSI. Meanwhile, in Marvel, everyone can fly or stick to walls, or they are given these tremendous superpowers. So the only things that they have left to be problems in their lives is themselves and their own personal problems. And you see it with Superman too, right? Like, they have to keep introducing like 12 flavors of kryptonite, because otherwise, when I was 12 or 13, I read a line in a book that I'm sure other people have used since then. But it was the first time I had encountered it. It was the idea that Superman's not brave. Because you don't have to be brave when nothing can hurt you. But everything can still hurt Batman. He can't buy not being hurt. So, and people are going to disagree, and people who love the MCU are going to come at me. And the MCU is tropey. I'm glad you enjoy it. I'm glad you enjoy those tropes. The trope that I don't enjoy about the MCU is the 50 billion deaths that don't matter. That the only time we see consequences for millions of people dying in the MCU is the Sokovia Accords. And even that is, it's only dealt with in the how it makes your heroes feel way. And I'm like, yeah, you killed hundreds of thousands of people. You actually should feel bad. That's people who kill hundreds of thousands of people. We call them Hitler. We call them Stalin. Like, if you are knocking hundreds of people off a bridge to their deaths, you are not the good guy. And so, like, the willingness to present that as the good guy because they're doing it for a good reason, not one of my favorite tropes, and in fact a very, very problematic trope that we may get into later. I think one of the things that I do want to talk about is superhero stories, and so that I can stop derailing everything into a Marvel versus DC debate, because, like, honestly, we're in Portland, I'm Dark Horse all the way. But yeah, so the tropes, you can use tropes to move the world, to solve your character's problems. You can use them they don't just have to get you, from plot point to plot point. You can use them to solve these micro problems. When you use a trope to solve a micro problem, that's the time that you have to be very aware of what the trope is and what it's associated with. If you want to watch some constant send-ups of those tropes, especially of interpersonal tropes, watch The Addams Family. Watch the Addams Family TV show, the black and white. Watch anything up to Addams Family Values and then stop. I know a lot of people are enjoying the Modern Wednesday. I don't think it does as good a job being aware of the tropes and the ways that it's sending them up. I think it is, because it is being made in a different time, some of the things that the original Addams Family did to send up tropes are tropes now that need to be sent up. And I don't think it's accomplishing that as well as many of us had hoped it would. But that aside, guys, I'm never here to tell you not to love problematic things. If you only love unproblematic things and things that are immune to critique, you will have nothing to love. There's nothing left. I love Batman. Kat loves Firefly. Christine loves, what do you love, Christine?
Oh gosh. I love Firefly too, for all of its problems.
I know it's really good.
I do like Marvel. Aside from, although I'm watching it differently now since some of our conversations, which is kind of interesting. But sorry, if my computer goes, it's because the cat is loving it very violently right now.
It looks like it. Which cat?
Jack.
Oh,
even better. She's all snotty nosed. So
oh, of course she is. Is she like super gross? Christine has the most disgusting cat, you guys. It's wonderful.
Yeah, but
she's
so
just
sweet.
gross.
But she's so
nasty.
Nice. She's so nice.
She's not nice. She's trying to be contagious.
I love Beauty and the Beast type stories, and that's super problematic in a lot of ways. This idea that you can change your abuser basically just by being nice enough and good enough is horrible. But
I mean, there's a question with Beauty and the Beast, though, isn't there, about who's the abuser?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, like, if the Beast has been locked in there for 100 years, the fact that we as a society are unwilling to say, like, maybe he's learned something in the past 100 years.
Yeah. It depends on the telling of it, because there's some that address that more with more thoughtfulness, I think, and there are some that sort of like gloss right over it. So,
well, the thing is that even in the original tellings, the Beast wasn't ever irredeemably bad.
Right.
We talk about it like he was irredeemably bad, but his actual sin was being rude and a little selfish.
A little narcissistic, maybe, kind of. Yeah.
He wasn't out there killing people. He wasn't committing genocide in his country. He wasn't even starving the peasants.
Right.
His big sin was that he failed at hospitality. And so he gets another chance to do the hospitality thing. And even in the original telling, where Beauty's father is there and the Beast says, oh, well, I'm going to keep you forever because I have to, because this is my misunderstanding of my burden that I have to do for the hospitality thing. Even then, Beauty's father says, yeah, but can I say goodbye to my kids? And the Beast is like, sure.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
And Beauty has always had agency in that story. Always. Even in the original telling, it is Beauty's decision to go to the castle. It is Beauty's choice to substitute herself for her father. And yeah, she thinks that, but she doesn't go up there with the intention of changing the beast.
No.
She goes up there with the idea that she's going to be in a fairly chill prison for the rest of her life. And her father got out to say goodbye. I don't know, certainly at the time that was being written, what prison meant among well-born people was that you would do a lot of traveling and visiting your family as long as you promised to come back. If you look at Richard I and how much time he spent in German prison, and why he was always busted and getting thrown in German prison, and then they would be like, okay, yeah, you can go visit your country and pick up taxes and come back and pay your ransom. And he's like, cool, I'm going to Jerusalem, don't mind me. You know, and I don't want to treat that lightly because it is Crusades and the whole problem with the Crusades, but I'm also talking about like Richard specifically in German prison. And so the, this is going to be a love story is very I'm sorry, I'm explaining Beauty and the Beast to you, aren't I? But like, if you look at the original tellings, if you look at the pre-Disney tellings, if you look at the Pearl tellings, she wasn't trying to make him love her. They were both living in this castle with invisible servants. So she didn't have to do a lot of, and so they spent some time together. And then like, she asked to go visit her family. And the Beast said, sure, which, we were just discussing, like, she didn't have an expectation. She's like, oh, my sister's getting married. Can I go see that? I think that was the reason.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
And like, he gave her a magic mirror where she could see and talk to her family all the time.
Yeah.
Because it took him like 10 seconds to figure out that she was as lonely as he was. And he was like, well, shit. So like, that's not her changing him. That's him having that personality and having had 100 years to figure out what he did wrong. So now he's like working on the hospitality thing a second time. Beauty goes to visit her family. She breaks her promise to him. And he gets like real sad and lonely and depressed and stops doing the personal hygiene thing and the getting out of bed thing, which is relatable, Beast. 100% relatable, big mood. And so like, she goes back and she's like, yeah, actually I care about you. And I think you can make a pretty good case that it is a metaphor for an arranged marriage where, if you hang out and try to spend some time with the person, you will find out that you have things in common and that you can do better together than alone. But at no point in that story does Beauty lack agency. At no point in that story does Beauty go into it with intent to make the Beast love her the way that she thinks she should be loved. At no point does the Beauty go into it with the intent of loving the Beast. That is a Disney grafted on piece of bullshit. If you can make someone love you before the last petal of the rose falls, that is supposed to create, more timeline urgency and true love. But there's no deadline in Beauty and the Beast. They just live together for a few years. And then they're like, oh, we're besties. Which, valid. They do have a lot in common.
Well, I'm feeling better about my irrational love, what I thought was an irrational love for this particular trope.
I can fix this for you. And, and I'm not saying, like, and Disney came along, and made it extremely problematic.
Yeah, and I might be blending some of the, and that actually the Disney one is probably what made me go, ooh, this is kind of problematic.
Yeah,
going back to re-examine the original. So
the Disney one is kind of problematic. The original much less problematic. I don't say that often.
Yeah.
The original Rapunzel is very problematic.
Mhm.
The original Rapunzel features uh sexual assault, features terrible power dynamics, features forced childbirth, features the original Sleeping Beauty, also sexual assault, also forced childbirth. There's a lot of mess there. Beauty and the Beast is one of the less messy stories, honestly. It's a morality tale, but it's a redemption tale too.
Mhm.
And this is, you know, it's then the author sending up some of the tropes at that time, right? Like, because okay, you have the prince, he's selfish, he's disobedient, he's inhospitable, which is a big sin if you're nobility in those days. And he gets cursed by a witch, and now he's beast forever. End of story, except that it doesn't have to be the end of the story. He gets a redemption arc. And so that's where we get from Little Red Riding Hood to Beauty and the Beast, right? The wolf, the grandma becomes the wolf and then gets to be a grandma again because they learn some things. And while we are not, now I want to write that. I want to write like sort of a novella length, like Beast's POV, My 100 Years Alone.
Oh, neat. Yeah. Go for
Right?
it. I'd
Like
read that.
where you get, yeah, you would read anything I wrote, that you're terrible.
I know. I
So where we get that character development, because it does all happen off screen, and it's part of the reason that Beauty and the Beast feels so problematic, is that all of the character growth happens off screen. All of the Beast's character growth happens
yeah.
between when the fairy shows up and when Beauty's dad shows up, and none of that is on screen. And all of Beauty and the Beast's bonding time happens in a montage,
Yeah.
both in the original story and in the Disney There Must Be Something There That Wasn't There Before song, which I used to sing to my little sister, I think, to make her go to sleep. What a weird memory. That and the All Dogs Go to Heaven soundtrack. Oh, Don Bluth. So yeah, so what were we actually, oh,
we went a little astray here, but that's what happens when you and I get together.
it's
That's
true.
why I
It's
don't
true.
talk much on these things.
Love your
Well,
problematic
Disney.
stuff though. Love your problematic stuff. Just when you are building your own stuff, know what's problematic in it. Do your best to avoid that. Like, we would all like to love stuff that is as unproblematic as possible while still being entertaining, right? So your job is to do that, to make something that's a little less problematic than what comes before you. And to do that, you have to know the tropes, you have to know their effects, you have to know what's going on and what you're putting into your story, both deliberately and inadvertently. Your beta readers will help you, your sensitivity readers will help you, your early readers will help you. Your friends will not help you so much.
Which is why I am a terrible reader for you, because
it's funny because Asha reads for me just fine, but Asha doesn't care. Asha will be like, Rowan, that thing that you did, I don't know if you know, but that's like, maybe it's not as racist in the US as it is in Australia. And I'm like, oh shit. I'm like, I did not even know I was evoking that. I was trying to use a, you know, stock character, a magical creature. And she's like, yeah, so about the history of that. I'm like, oh, got me again. You got me again, magical creatures. But yeah, so have readers who will tell you when you're not doing well. Have readers who do not care as much about your feelings as they care about your story. That's, if you can find a reader who cares more about your story than your feelings and is able to articulate what's wrong with it, keep them. Keep them even if that doesn't make you feel good. Because the first time they say this one's good, I'm setting you up for an abusive beta relationship. But it will feel so good. And if you have a beta reader and you're struggling and you're like, oh, everything you're doing is pointing out what's wrong, just say, hey, I need to hear a couple things that I do right every time so that I can get out of my head and hear, because when we only talk about the negative things, it makes me forget that the rest of the story wasn't negative. And this is something we see in the super challenge too, right, Christine?
Yeah.
Is that people will really focus in on their negative critique and miss the fact that if the only thing that the judge is telling you is that you should run spell check, probably not a lot else in your story is wrong. So yeah, that's it.
So
You
we
have the power, though.
deviated a little bit, but that's all right. Sometimes that's fun too. So
Yeah. So we will see you next month, and bye-bye.